How many people do you have on tonight?
Hold on, let me find out. 5.
5. Okay,
Oh.
can you ask, I'm gonna ask for a sound check, can you let?
The internet is unstable. It said that, so this is where you gotta do the back and forth.
We're just gonna make sure that they can hear me from this far away, or else we'll reorganize a little bit.
You don't mind if you move your
See,
chart and size, which is more like on this side of the screen.
I mean, everybody else can have copies. We have enough copies for one, and we don't even need the presentation. Well, we didn't need it for.
Yeah, there we go.
Right here?
Yeah, see it?
Okay, and then you
And
guys
we
just
don't
tell
have-
me if I'm in your way.
Yeah.
This, I know they can hear me from over here.
That way you'll be closer to your.
Hold on, hold on. All right, you're not gonna know where we are, so we're gonna go here.
Sounded. Oh. Deal with that later. But thank you all for coming out. I do see some new faces from our previous meetings. This is actually our 4th and the final one that we have scheduled of these public workshops. We had 3rd, second one, Weaverville night. I would say there was just make sure we had these opportunities for public engagement, so we're glad to be here. I will do some quick introduction. So Dan,
I haven't met you, Ryan.
Dimitri, Ryan, and Brian
Right.
right here.
Peter.
Peter, okay.
Jennifer.
Okay.
And I'm Drew Blavani, the Cannabis Division Director.
I'm Cadet. I'm the administrative coordinator for the Cannabis Division, one of them.
And I am the District 1 Supervisor, Rick Lutweiler. So thanks again for being here. What we have arranged is that we're going to take you through just a brief thing to set the stage for kind of what have we done to get here, why are we here, what's next after this. And then what we really want to invest all the time in is engaging with you about the things you want to talk about. So we don't have a preset agenda that, oh, here's what we're going to talk about. You're going to tell us what you want to talk about, and then we're going to have that conversation. Okay. All right. So Drew, do you want to go ahead?
Sure. So we're going to go to the first slide. So this slide is just sort of a generalized workshop agenda concept, and so we're going to be introductions. This is a bit of the overview, and then I'll jump into the history and purpose, overview of the current ordinances. We'll probably, unless Rick, you want to do the problems and solutions again like we did last night, we could just jump to the 10 main topics. So I think that's it. We're going to jump 2 slides forward. And so on this slide, you can see, just give a little bit of history. First adopted in 2016, codified in Ordinance 815-823. Multiple amendments and updated ordinances have been adopted 2016, rule changes at the DCC, and so one of the sort of primary functions of this ordinance update is to make sure that regulations from other agencies, and also just to consolidate all of 10 ordinances that have been adopted since 2016 for many of the different activities or license types, which I'll go into a little more later, and then just, kind of a brief description of the purpose of an ordinance, essentially for Trinity County to establish a commercial cannabis permitting program, regulated by the county as the land use authority to allow for a variety of commercial cannabis activities while protecting the public health, safety, and welfare, by acting a strong and effective regulatory and enforcement control mechanisms through those ordinances. One of the things we've clarified more recently is sort of the difference in responsibility between the county's responsibility and the state responsibility to meet the Department of Cannabis Control Authority, as well as the agency for review. And the DCC responsibility is the state regulations and actually licensing cannabis activities. Next slide. So here you can see on the left-hand side, we have the 10 county ordinances that govern commercial cannabis activities, all of which have been established separately or adopted separately since 2016. And then each of those ordinances, which is the column on the right, sort of follow the same framework of how they're constructed. And so in terms of ordinance consolidation, one of the main things we did was take out any redundant sections from the various ordinances and consolidate them all into one ordinance so there aren't repetitive sections. I think that's good for that slide. We're going to jump past this one. So here you can see what we have currently as our proposed timeline. This is our, as Rick said, this is the fourth and final meeting for this first draft. The proposal has been to 6th and then to the board for December 5th. So that covers our sort of current proposed timeline. And the next slide is covering the opportunities for public input, which, as I've said, and as Rick said, this is our fourth public workshop. And then the next two opportunities that we currently have scheduled with public comment during the Planning Commission hearing on October the 26th, and again, public comment for the board supervisors on December the 10th hearing on Zoom. You can email cannabis.ordinance@or with your comments, which we will be kept meetings. So I think that covers that side. Rick, do you want to just run through these, or you want me to do some? Or?
Why don't you just, you can go ahead and walk through them.
Okay, so here we have the main topics that we have, the repetitive sections, and there needs to be some updates to the definitions as well to capture terms that weren't previously defined and make sure that there aren't conflicts between terms that are defined and other concepts. We're proposing to convert the term license to permit, and I sort of touched on that in terms of, our Trinity County's authority as the land use authority. It's a more appropriate term to use the term permit versus license. We are the permitting authority, and the state DCC is the licensing authority. We've also established a non-conforming uses section. We've established a set of criteria for stacking. We've established a land use buffer table, which basically it kind of combines the previously adopted limitations sections and stack requirements into one consolidated table. And related to buffers, we're clarifying the term that was previously used as relates to commercial cultivation variances, which is a setback requirement. A setback requirement actually refers to the distance between a parcel line to within the parcel, which is establishing a distance between an element within one parcel to an element within another parcel. none of the setback requirements or the required distances which were converted to buffer have changed. Section related to establishing opt-out, opt-in criteria through overlay zones, and I will get to that in discussion tonight. Similar activities in zoning districts. Staff went through and actually compared the allowable uses in the existing zones for non-cannabis activities and tried to make sure that what we were requiring in terms of DUP or CUP was somewhat more consistent in that regard. And we have proposed to establish an appeal criteria, which we may get into more tonight in discussion. We've also updated and consolidated what was previously termed the revocation denial section with some of the language that was proposed to us from Enter Harnish Rincon team. And so we now have a consolidated enforcement, suspension, denial, revocation, and fines section. And then we have the opportunity for you all to raise other topics that are not on this list of engagement topics for us to discuss this evening. So I'll turn it back over to Rick.
Okay, and we can just leave this up here for a minute. That's all right. So as you can imagine, we've had 9 hours worth of workshops. So we've already have talked about this a lot with the folks that have come previously. And so we've already gotten some input from that. I would guess that we've received somewhere around 50 emails to cannabis.ordinance@trinitycounty.org, somewhere in there, a little more, a little less. And then we have received some of the comment cards that are here, just kind of handwritten things. And the comment cards, the email address, that all continues. So what you have questions that you really want to understand, well, what's changing and how will this particular thing be addressed in this proposed ordinance? What concern do you have about what you see being proposed, or what suggestions? And as we've said in other meetings, we all bring our own opinions to here, and we want to hear all those opinions. So we need to respect. If somebody's something that's fine, you'll get your turn to say that you disagree with it, and maybe we'll have a good healthy discussion about why. So that's kind of how an ad hoc and at the timeline, because some of the feedback we've received in some of these meetings is we're having this opportunity to engage, but we never get through everything we want to cover. So can we have more? And you can't do it because you have to have noticing for the planning commission and everything else. Well, at the same time that we're getting that feedback from you, we're also in the next 30 to 60 days that we didn't think we had to, and that's going to tie them up. So we made an informal decision that I'm sure Drew will confirm with Trent tomorrow. But at this point, we are not planning to notice for October 26th planning commission meeting, which means we will basically not be completely abandoning our process and all, but we will be extending the timeline, and we won't know what that looks like until we have some more discussion. We have a 7-hour, I think it is, ad hoc committee meeting scheduled for next Wednesday, because we just can't get enough of this. But what we're going to do in that meeting is all of those comments and questions and stuff that we receive via email or comment cards, all that we capture here with notes that staff takes or I take here, all of those are going to be grouped by subject. So when the ad hoc committee sits down with the 40+ page document, we'll also sit down with however many pages it is for each section. Here's what we heard from people. And that will help us guide. The current timeline was saying, and that draft then comes back out to the public at the same time it's really going to the planning commission. Right now, the way this is kind of going, we're going to have to do that next week and find out, okay, what do we do? Do we get a second draft and have more engagement like this? What does it do to our timeline? What implications does that have? So that part I a little bit in flux, but we're trying to that we've spent, our staff is here. They also have to prepare for these, and that's all taking away from them doing what you want as cultivators and such to be doing to process applications. Encourage you to bear with us. So this next step then is, as I mentioned earlier, this is a list of things that we thought you might want to talk about. But what we are going to start with is you tell me what are the subjects that you would like us to talk about, and then we're going to do a little hand raise vote and prioritize those, and we'll go in the order that you say. So you can tell me one of the things on that list, or you can tell me something that's not on that list. I'll capture it here, and then we'll vote and get started. So what is these? Okay. It's gonna be a short night.
We talked about it a little bit last.
Now that has come up in almost every discussion, but we haven't always gotten to spend much time on it. Okay, so micro business. We don't have to have a long list. All right, well, we'll just start there. Raise your hand if you want to start with fees.
I must.
Okay, what if you want to start with micro business? Easygoing group. Okay,
We gotta,
so
can zoom in? They say acre grows is what they, where would that
acre
fit?
grows. Okay. Okay, so Drew, can you tee us up about fees? So what have we done with the ordinance that's different? And again, we'll take questions and comments and all that.
Let me pull up the draft for me to refer to. But essentially what we've done in terms of consolidation is to take the existing fees from each of the separate ordinances and consolidate them into one fee section. Fees are actually at the end of this first draft, starting on page 45, going to page 46, and into page 47. So essentially, what we've done is, as I said, take all of the existing fees and incorporate them into one table, which is at the bottom of page 47. And we have made some changes to the proposed general plan update fee. And so previously, the general plan update fee was $1,000 for most license types. And so we've converted, in many cases, the general plan update fee amount of $1,000 to an EIR update fee. And then we've added a $75 general plan update fee, which is consistent with the cost that the average non-cannabis planning project pays for their general plan update fee in conjunction with their permits. So that's kind of the overview. I imagine
I can't. be
whoever
far.
proposed
Hold
that might
on.
have some specific
Glasses.
questions.
There we go.
As we start into the comments and questions and such, one of the things I will definitely not remember even a majority of what's been said, but one of the things that came up here, just so you understand the feedback we've already received is, that was new fees for an EIR. We've already paid in some sense for the existing EIR. So if a new EIR is needed to support new cultivators and doing new things, let them pay. Kind of generally, is to go out and say, here's what we think we need to do in an EIR. Let's do an RFP and see how much that costs. Let's see who should pay that call that we've already received. But let's go. We'll let you start.
Great.
Yeah.
Let's do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think it helps. What people have already said that we've already. Okay. Yes.
Yeah, I agree that we came up with, that was a great approach for next steps. And then I just also wanna put in another. Can we please look at the specialty license? Not in, like disproportionately expensive compared to its scale, compared to the other licenses. 5,000 square foot licenses, compared to legally expensive.
Okay, so for those trying to listen in, the comment is about, besides what I was just saying that we heard before, is taking another look at the some of the fees, like specialty fees, specifically the specialty fees, which comparative to what you can do with that seems unreasonably expensive relative to the other fees. Is that pretty much capturing it? Okay, thank you. Drew, do you have any comments on that, just so we know?
Just to clarify, when we're talking specialty, are you referring to?
Specialty, not cottage, but the 5,000 square feet.
Okay.
Specialty
Specialty outdoor.
And I think it's partly that we have this additional $1,000. But when you look at the specialty cottage, I could stack two, this is just like the way I'm looking at that is, I could stack two specialty cottages and be paying half of what is 5,000. And then the 10,000 is only like a little bit more for double. And so like impacts of the 5,000, I know you still have to travel to the ends of the earth to inspect everybody in their piece spots, that it doesn't matter what your scale is, but then there's also the fact that your seat was already reviewed and your scale is pretty, when you come out, like you have to have to see on 5,000 square feet. So I'm just looking at like the equity of this fee being disproportionately high for that particular license type. And I don't know how that, and that's just like it's been how it is this time, and I think it's a leftover from the very first read.
I guess just, kind of thinking through this table, when we get, and so that likely is the best way to, quantify what those fees should be versus just sort of throwing a so.
Which is, I think, a consensus about this.
Okay, and so again, for those listening in, there's some more elaboration on the specific example of the specialty and understanding that there are still visits that are required and that takes travel time and all these other kinds of things, but still, can we just make sure that rather than we just pick the number way back when, that it's more in alignment? And then Drew was commenting, since we are in the midst of doing a fee study, we'll already be coming up with more relevant data to set those, and then we can keep this feedback in mind and make those adjustments. Anything else while I'm writing up?
So the case studies for the EIR fee as well as the permit fee?
I think what we're talking about that with the EIR is a RFP. We would do when we knew this is what.
RFP stand for?
request for proposal, I'm sorry, we want to do. Then we would send out this request for proposal that basically says, how much would you charge to help us create an whatever? Yeah, it's an estimate, yeah. And then that helps us then figure out, okay, so how much is it gonna cost us? We have to pass those fees along. How does that look and who pays it and so forth? But the fee study, I'll just make a note. Underway. Jake, I think I saw your hand going up.
I have just a question about the speed. I'm sure I should probably support Adrian in this part of the idea. The speed is. We're all shooting the dark here without fee study, obviously, but the fee should essentially come down based on like. If we have contractors based on the global hours, if you have a cost for the county to come out, process your license, inspect your license, run the program, right? So if you have 5 license types on one parcel, theoretically, your fees should add up to more than if you have 5 of the same license type on one parcel, because it's gonna take maybe not 5 times as much time processing those licenses, inspecting it, whatever, then if you come out, there's 5-10,000 that are all type 1 mixed light, that's pretty easy inspection, correct?
So the comment is about, as we work on this fee study, that we will take into consideration, the encouragement or expectation is we would take into consideration that if I'm coming out to look at 5 implementations of the same kind of license, or now we're calling permit, that should probably take less time and effort on staff, consultants, whatever else, than if I'm looking at 5 different types of activities in the same place.
The same as processing this license.
Yeah, so, and go ahead.
And a question to be also has the department, I know you spoke about this before, but has the department looked at any ways to, I don't know how to ask the question, right, but as somebody who has 5 licenses that are the same on one parcel, I've had the state come out to look at one of those 5 licenses. So it took a day for 3 inspectors to come look at one of 5 identical licenses on one parcel, and they said, oh, we had no idea that 4 had ones here. It is that we laugh, but surprising Trinity County had it. So is there something, could there be something looked at? Sure, there's some real efficiency.
There's also looking at streamlining and efficiency as we're looking also at the fee
Because if I'm
study.
going to Jeff's house, I'm going out there with a list of everything I want to talk to him about for the last 6 months, because we're not going to fight.
Okay, so I think I'll start with something and then Drew weigh in. So one of the things that I've kind of learned in this role is that we have 2 different ways of doing fees for county-based services. One is that we look at how much time and cost has been involved in doing this task for people in the past. And we say, so on average, if it costs us that much money and we did 100 of those tasks, then this is the math and that's what we will charge going forward. So it's basically cost recovery based on a look back historically. Another way, and the Department of Transportation does this a lot, is we will basically take a deposit from you up front because we're going to bill you the exact cost that we experience. Those are 2, very different approaches. They're both about cost recovery. They just come at it different ways. So the group is looking into all this stuff that you've got coming up on here, or do you already have a year's worth of data tracked?
I believe we started in September, so we're just finishing 1 full year of doing staff time studies.
Okay, so we have a year's worth of data that now we can look back at. Even there, we have to do extrapolations because this last year has been everybody going through a brand new process, both us and you. And so when you're renewing, you might not have to do all the same things. Should that cost less then? And those sorts of things. So we have to look at all that. And then the other thing, Jake, I think that's relevant is Drew has been trying to work with grants and with the board and everybody to get approval and funding for some systems that will help them manage all this much more effectively and interface with the state. So that when we're looking at paper files, we're looking at a system, and it's Excel or those kinds of things. It's a system designed for cannabis project management, and it links with the state so we can be in sync with each other. So that will be something that eventually will help us be more accurate, be more efficient. It may take us a while to see how much that affects our efficiency, and then that gets reflected in future fees. But that's my understanding, Drew, and take it from there.
Sure, so I mean, just to give a little background in terms of, my understanding of the way a fee study is accomplished, essentially, it starts with a staff-based time study. So all of the cannabis division staff are logging the time spent on a per project basis, or if it's not for a specific project, it falls into a particular cost category. And then those costs combined with all the rest of the budgeted expenditures and overhead are combined to come up with the results is the fee study. I think that, we're gonna have to see where we land in terms of, hard fee numbers versus moving towards the full cost recovery concept. Off the top of my head, I think that likely where we'll land in this first iteration of this being established before we get a second year's worth of time studying and a new, 2024 fee study done, would be that for the normal sort of environmental review permit and the fee established in this ordinance, or reference to that happening at some point in the future. And then for modifications post approval, we would capture the additional costs for each applicant or each project on a per project basis, so that, people that aren't making changes aren't paying more, but people that want to make changes to their approved configuration would have to do that through reform, so that
Make noise. Okay, so any questions following up on that, or something new about fees that you want to talk about? Yes, Adrian.
I just would really hope that when the fee study is being produced, that there is clear bifurcation between renewals and applications, because there's spent years going through the approval process, and I know that's cost a bunch of money. But just having fact of the matter is, today I paid my license fee, and I know that the staff had to put time to review some documentation so that everything was in order. And then the time it took to actually stamp the thing. But other than that, and I know there's plenty of hidden costs. I'm not saying but it should reflect the renewal cost versus a new cost. And the timing on the fee study seems pretty good, because it seems like in my case, I would have been a year ago exactly got my approval finally approved. So that fee study would have started in September. So it captured my entire year's worth of experience under this renewal process. You would have some pretty good numbers there. And just for some insight, two counties like insight on how they run their renewal process. In Humboldt, anytime they review your packet for a given reason, it's logged and it's sent to bill. If you go site visit, they send your bill, and that's it. There's no other fees associated with their local reviews. And in Nevada County, they did a full fee study, found it took about 10 hours to do a renewal. Fully weighted rate was $110 an hour, so $1,100, and then they just double it. So for a 10,000 square foot outdoor license in Nevada County, it's exactly $2,200. So it's just two approaches to the same area.
It's interesting. I guess, can you check with folks to see, or do they need me repeating or summarizing?
I haven't got.
We can just, maybe we can ask that question, folks. Do you need me to sort of repeat like what you were we were at least hearing? Did you hear that well enough, or do I need to summarize and repeat? The thing that strikes me about that, Adrian, is if I heard you right, they're saying loaded cost $110 an hour, 10 hours, now I'm gonna double it. That doesn't seem to fit, that you're supposed to be charging cost recovery.
Right, programmatically, it works. People who are close into Nevada City, there are people who are 4 hours out San Juan Ridge.
So they're just balancing.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
And
Okay.
it also provides a contingency fund in case there's any hiccups or lawsuits or whatnot.
Okay,
So they just maintain that, that's maintained in the program.
Okay,
It's not spent out.
It's legally the town
Yeah.
transferred, oh, right, they're just.
Right, Zoom's quiet, so you're,
okay, I'm
Keep
just gonna
going.
keep going. I don't want to take up a lot of our time repeating if we're not hearing, if we really think that's important. I can see some other hands about fees. Yes,
Is there a speculator schedule plan on when, as I know this process is everybody has been greatly refined in the last year? Is there like speculatory time when another key study would be on these fees?
you mean after this one, you mean?
Yeah, we're gonna come out with data for this last year, and then you're gonna implement hopefully changes to make this more efficient and better. When would be another time that we could expect to see all the 2 years and 3 years, there'd be another key study to see how that.
Have you guys already talked about that?
We have not talked about that. My thinking was that, you know, one of the concepts that we're moving towards in terms of related to the fee concept is that the way the water board does it in terms of enrollment fees. My understanding is they do a fee study every year, and we just had a coordination meeting with water board today. And they said that their fees were going to increase by 5% to basically cover COLAs, which is cost of living adjustments to water board staff, not cannabis COLAs. And so, you know, I think it's pretty much whatever we decide and specify in the ordinance. I'd be happy for us to propose annually. I think one thing in terms of kind of where we're landing in our calendar year, with the expectation that we're gonna finish it, you know, late November, December, let's say, would be that it'd probably be more appropriate to move that into a timeline that fits more effectively with our fiscal year calendar. So that prior to the fiscal year, we're updating fees so that we can capture that in our budgeting, or, you know, somewhat more related versus some arbitrary date that just is a carryover from where we are now. But that, I've noted that comment, you know,
Okay.
as far as the timeline for updating fee studies in the future. And then, you know, to Adrian's comment about renewals, one of the things that we won't have significant data for is the cost to perform MMRP inspections, which is a process that, you know, has just more recently started rolling out. And so we have some limited data for, you know, what we've done over the past several months, but I don't think that that's sufficient. So my thinking currently would be that where we will land is just with an established license fee for the you know, specific license types, and then maybe some reference to the fact to more clearly differentiate and have sufficient data to establish a renewal fee versus a initial license fee. There's obviously some significant time and cost difference in you know, a new license or new permit application that requires, you know, environmental review of the Appendix C document versus a renewal, which just would require you know, we just don't currently have sufficient data to establish that. So those are the concepts that, you know, I've noted.
I want to make comments that my inclination is what I heard from Drew, is that we should be looking at this again in a year. One, if we have a whole new set of ordinance and process of procedures, that would change things. If we have implemented a system, that would change things. We'll be further mature in how we're handling things and learning and streamlining. So it just seems that at least for a couple of years, we should be looking at this annually to make sure that we're changing. And so it might not be as important to do it that quickly, but I think for this, my opinion,
Yeah, I think that the biggest thing I'm thinking is we need to make sure that we have in the ordinance a method to change the fees without having to amend the ordinance. So we don't want to lock the fees into code. We want to have a fee schedule or something that we can change, and so we don't have to go back to the board. We might have to do that anyway, but so we don't have to go through the whole process just to change the fee.
okay.
language.
So even if you have a table that has the fees that say, you know, subject to resetting with fee, review with fee studies and yeah, the board has to approve all the new fees anyway, so.
But at least we don't have to, it doesn't, it wouldn't be an ordinance amendment, it would
Yeah.
be a fee update.
Ready to be an update to the county fees code section. I
Yeah.
think is the alternative there.
And I should know this because we've just been through it, but am I remembering right that those get heard twice? Like it's a public hearing about the new fees the first time. And then there's a second reading, which is another opportunity, and then that's when it takes effect. Okay, was there, I'm sorry, yes, thank you.
In addition to that, then tying it to, just to clarify, I'm just reading, to clarify that would, the fees, the annual fee study is required and annually, obviously, and then the fees could be adjusted based off of that, so it's tied to one another in ordinance, rather than having to
Yeah.
go into.
That would be language.
That holds accountability.
I don't know if I would call it an annual fee study unless we put a date on there. It's like an annual fee study if we start in fiscal year 24, 25, whichever one we can make work. To get it in the right timeline.
And just a question on timing, because Drew, you referenced, perhaps the timing would be tied in with our fiscal year, which is a July 1st and so forth. And then my mind immediately went to the time at which cultivation starts, generally, depending on how you're cultivating. And so would that shift? Would that mean really people would want to know what those fees were back in March so that they can plan for that period? Or does, I guess I'm asking for input. Go ahead, Adrian first.
Application dates for licenses are all of the permits are all of them.
Yeah, yeah, they don't all happen at the same time at all, which is probably a good thing, because otherwise
Yeah.
we'd be at.
Construction. And discussion. All in the annual January.
Right, and I think something like a disbursement, have it work with whatever the workload is for preparing for the budget. You do the budgets in September, like do it so it works, not so it's an additional thing. If you have the opportunity to write whatever you want right now to set.
Yeah, what's interesting is the real work for the budget happens in like April, May.
Right, yeah, you're just
And-
showing it to us. Yeah.
Yeah, because, and then we get that preliminary budget, which we always know we can't afford. And then in September is when we figure out what we can really afford. So, okay, Jay.
I just think, I know I can't speak for anybody else myself, I just, what I hear on this is like, that people would like to see. They're required in the ordinance.
It requires
Required in the ordinance. I
that
know
there
we're
is,
all sitting here very positively talking about, man, this really should happen, like, once a year, so you have a good idea, but we're on your side right now. And everybody was been saying, we should have these studies for 7 years, so if it's in the ordinance, I think it will happen,
And if the fees are tied to it, then it will happen.
for sure.
okay, so I'm putting that there as input that they prefer to see codified. And I can see pros and cons for that, but
Well, I could understand qualifying that we're going to do the fee study at a certain time, whether it's annually or every 2 years, whatever. I am good with that. I just wouldn't put a date on it until we find out from Drew what that date is.
Yeah.
But I have no problem having it in the ordinance that says we're going to update the fees at this time.
yeah. And I should, we should be clear, when Dan and I are speaking, you're just hearing two voices, because these decisions all end up being up to, planning commission and the full board and all that kind of stuff, but our role is to provide input to the process, and so at least you're hearing our input when we feel comfortable sharing it. Dana?
Can we codify that none of the fees will go to the sheriff?
Well, that's already qualified.
Oh, yeah.
Say that,
But, well, it depends on how how we are talking, because it's,
I don't think she personally means the sheriff. I think she means the sheriff's part.
well, I mean, I don't know if we can
I don't know how.
completely cut the sheriff's department out of everything cannabis related if we need them, but it's a discussion we could have.
so I'm just starting a new chart, because while this is tied to fees, we're kind of edging in specifically you're referring to code enforcement fees.
No, I
Okay.
mean to the sheriff's department. However, if those are considered code enforcement, sure. Because there is,
It's cost related to code enforcement.
it's,
just to
okay.
clarify.
Yeah, so
That's
to be
what
clear,
looks out there. See it on your face.
Yeah.
Let it roll.
to be clear,
Let it roll.
my understanding is like with the tax revenue, that becomes general fund revenue, can be used
Right.
in any way. And then there are fees that are specifically included in the budget right now, in this year's budget again, for code enforcement that is funded from the cannabis program. So those are the two specific things I know about. None of the other fees that are collected for processing permits and so on and so forth directly then going to the sheriff, but there is this collection of 500,000 or something this year that's set aside for code enforcement by the sheriff. And what's supposed to happen, and Drew's even talked about kind of updating the MOU, which is a memorandum of understanding. It's basically the agreement between the two departments, but updating that. So what's supposed to happen is the sheriff provides backup to show that the people that are being paid for by those fees, how much hours and work and everything can they tie back to actually doing
Right.
code enforcement. So that's how it's supposed to work. So the 550 is like a holding place, or 500, whatever it is,
There's code enforcement for people in the program, which they don't
which is separate.
do.
This is all about outside the program.
So how is
Right.
that, and why, how is that held against our program? Why is our program paying that?
Okay, so that's what I thought. We're getting into this, I assume. So this has come up on a number of
For a
occasions.
2-year-old, she needs to understand.
Say that?
She's for a 2-year-old. Because I'm
Okay.
36, and I still don't. So if we can go for 2-year-old level, maybe it'll help some of this.
Yeah, well, and obviously I'm the least experienced on this, but my recollections from I've been involved in so far, basically the decision early on, and that's still basically being sustained, is the logic behind that is that if you aren't enforcing people to not grow illegally, then you are not, that I should put it the more positive way. If you are enforcing the illegal, that is pushing people into the legal, which supports the legal program. If you have a legal program and everybody's doing everything you have to do, but we're letting these folks do whatever the hell they want to do, then why would you be in the program? And so that, I think, is kind of the logic that is there.
Okay.
I'm saying, that's, Dan, would you?
Yeah, that. Maybe the 2-year-old version.
I can get down there with a 2-year-old.
I can do. So.
Is there a point, we'll get the fee study. Is there a point where, I don't know where that logic cited or something, but is there a point where that's reviewed? Because I'm sure that what Dana's will stress for you that. If Tim Saxton or whoever the sheriff may be is able to convince the board that what I need more money, look at this, the Trinity Pines still has 1,500 grows in it. I need $30 million this year. Well, hey, look, all of a sudden now, this is extreme, but now Adrian's fee is $27,000 because Tim Saxton needs to give out quite literally freaking parking tickets from a helicopter. And I've said it before and I will say it again, because everybody here, I'm fine being the angry one about this. We are talking about civil nuisance violations that require special training and an airplane or a helicopter to identify. Which is, I think we will see when the fee study comes out, is one of the single largest costs to this program. Which is insanity. I have respect for everybody sitting up there. But not a single one of you guys will stand on your own and say, boy, this makes sense. And nobody in this room will say it, because it doesn't, it's fucking crazy. So. Everybody wants to ask the question, we're trying to figure out how to get the fees normal, how to make the program run right. But we're literally sitting here like paying insane alimony to a crazy ex-wife.
And from code enforcement violation fees, does the program get that cash?
Right.
Say that again? the fines.
Cannabis program get money from the code enforcement violation fees.
I think, but we had this discussion somewhat last night, all fines go to the general fund.
Right, the answer is
All
no.
fines.
So the operating costs come out of cannabis, this is for her, not me. The operating costs come out of cannabis fees. And then the fines levied, when they're paid. Come back to the general fund, and then from the general fund, you guys are able to, I've never wanted money before, so I'm trying to figure this out. And then the general fund, we're able to give the money everywhere that you want, when it originally came to the cannabis fund, right? Is that it?
Well,
I've been charged with it, but I've never been convicted, so I'm trying to figure out if that's how you want the money. Because it seems pretty slick.
I
So-
can't answer your questions specifically, but just to clarify, yes, all of the fine dollars collected do go into general fund discretionary dollars. The cannabis division does get our shared costs of the attorney's fees related to those proceedings returned to the cannabis division. So while we don't get the fine dollars directly, we do get our shared attorney's costs returned. And I want to say, gosh, I don't know the number. I want to say we got $30,000 or $50,000 of shared attorney's costs returned to cannabis division during this last fiscal year.
And I think going back to some of the things, like I said earlier, of things that we've heard about this in the past, one of them was, I guess, people looking for a compromise to say, at least if we have to, as participants of the program, fund this code enforcement, then at a minimum, reimburse all of those costs from fee collections before any goes into the general fund. That was one of the things that I have heard. And then I've heard they shouldn't be in here at all, all that stuff. So, and again, if we're focused on, what do you want to see? What concerns do you have? And so we can have debates and all that, but it's really just, we need to capture what is the input that you want considered when we pull together the next iteration.
Well, make it any more clear, or are we clear?
Well,
Let's.
You see what I got.
And it's years of time that is past due now that we're not gonna keep taking it, and it's not okay, and it's pretty serious. And I can't emphasize that anymore. I can't make it any, I don't know how much out there we can make it. I mean, I think the 2-year-old does it, so, yeah, it has to be addressed. And
Maybe just a real, a real, not like. The 2-year-old version of, hey, we think sometime a while back. Somebody decided that like code enforcement totally would help the growers.
We didn't decide that.
Because
yeah, I should be more specific.
we know who came up with it for sure. I don't know if Margaret's on the line, but we know who came up with it, maybe she does, but it's bullshit. Everybody knows it is. Maybe we could have applied ignorance for a while saying that like, hey, this is helping, but like, quite frankly, our money getting used to go out and hunt down people who have nothing to do with us, instead of being used to make sure we have licenses and have the program operate. I can tell you that like, the people who didn't have a license for a year or 2 years, definitely don't feel like their neighbor who got abated had any huge benefit on them still not earning a living for a year or two.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
just a false, it's not true. That backup, that reason is false. It doesn't, so it can't. And then there's just the whole, I mean.
Legal program from enforcement of the illegal. Raise your hand if that's your opinion.
It's, the reason is a lot more complicated and it's definitely not that simple. And you want to get into it, we can some other time.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's really not that simple, and
Okay.
that is not a correlation. It's just.
The correlation that justifies. There is something to be spoken for it. It's not like, where'd you come up with that? But it's not justifiable. I think that's the difference. That might be the nuance difference, between,
And so as
right,
Rick-
like the justification.
Rick referenced. The document,
Being.
so I don't know what the public, that is essentially, you know, that is the framework that we currently have established from cannabis within fee payer dollars towards code enforcement activities. So I think that, you know, if the MOU is updated, we likely wouldn't be able to cost for another year and a set of criteria so that we could actually more clearly quantify the costs for code enforcement activities going forward, so that the time study that the sheriff's office does can be included into the time study and fee study for the cannabis division in subsequent years after we, if we adopt, you know, new MOUs between cannabis division and
So just so I can at least share what I have captured as input so far regarding code enforcement fees. That you feel that they should be removed from the program fee costs. If not, fines from code enforcement should come back to the program. And the foundation for that is that any benefit that is received from this does not justify the cost of the program. Is that? Okay, Jake, Adrian.
I don't want to just to tie into that. I don't necessarily get as part of this discussion, but my question is, we're talking about fees, we're talking about a share of what comes back from the legal side of it. In this fee study, because it attaches to code enforcement, right, where our dollars are going, are we going to be able to see, and I asked this in the budget hearing, I've talked to Saxon about it since then, on the phone, as he requested. Are we gonna be able to see the difference that the money spent, we've changed from a $1,100 a day fine to $1,000 a day abatement fine, right? Are we gonna be able to see the difference in what has been, like we have a $100 a day fee and X amount came back to the county versus we spent $500,000 in code enforcement with $1,000 a day fee, X amount came back. I know what the answer is, but you know, these are all, every action we have has a fee and there's a return and there's a result, but there doesn't seem to be any circling back and looking at it.
So Jake, what I'm gonna capture here is that the fee study should reflect the net financial impact of enforcement and
Our fees are getting based on his needs or the sheriff's, not his, the department's needs. And so when the result for, well, the same as we're looking at the cannabis, it's the same fee payers, it's the same fee, right? The moral of my story is I know that when it was $100 a day fee, we spent X amount and we got millions back. When it was $1,000 a day, we spent X amount and we got hundreds of thousands of dollars back. So with those kinds of returns, our fees are going to be higher for shittier results, correct?
well,
And this is
Not-
all attached
actually,
to our same $5,000 licensing fee.
actually, the way it works now, it wouldn't change because those fine revenues don't come back in anyway, so it's not netting.
They come
So-
back to the
so-
general fund.
Yeah, but that's not included in a fee study for this department.
Right, but there's, let's say between last year, this year, and next year, there's an X number of illegal grows that the sheriff's action has to go after, goes after, right? Comes to us and says, $500,000, because I think it's gonna make the net we need, right? Well, whatever the system is we're looking at, he comes back next year and I would be dumbfounded if he doesn't ask for more money. He's gonna ask for more money and say, I need more money, look at this, there's still growing pot out there. It's still, this is what's crushing the licensing program is the illegal growth in Trinity County. And, but this all comes from our fee. This is why you know that doesn't have anything to do with the fee. It goes back into the general fund. But him wanting more money increases our fee, which we will see in the fee study. His results, and what it comes back to, has zero impact on our fee. When in reality, if he was having better results, our amount of money going to him would be reduced because there would be a fee would grow. And that's not the case. It's certainly not for enforcement.
So what I've captured is when we're doing the fee study, that fee study should reflect the net dollar impact of enforcement cost lines.
We're doing the fee study should that comes from any grower to their fee in the county to the end of it. And what that penny impacts and what the return is to that county. The higher the return, the less the county should need. This, you are only allowed to do this with the fee or the cost to operate the program that you're impacted by. You've established that code enforcement is something that impacts us, so it's rightfully, you guys are allowed to use. I'm not saying it's rightfully, you're saying rightfully you guys can use our fees for it. So that needs to be part of this fee study because it's the same. It's all connected.
And is that what I just said?
But
Well, that's what I said. You're saying that the fee study should reflect the net financial impact of the code enforcement costs and the fees that come back to the county because of it.
He captured it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
What percentage of the fines actually get paid?
Well, at least, the anecdotal information I have is since program inception, approximately 6 million, of which we've got, we maybe collected a couple million. We probably wrote off 1 million, and there's still 2.5 to 3 million that we're now trying to get a collection agency to help us get.
And how much of those and 100 a day versus 1,000 a day?
More of it was certainly from when the fines were $100 a day, based on the information I see.
All right, do you want to keep going on that? Or do you want to go to another subject? We have micro business. Want to go there?
There's support, Zoom support for micro business conversation.
There's like, we're done with it.
Mhm.
Okay.
There is support for the last one on Zoom, just hands up agreeing.
Okay, who wants to start,
We're going.
with either comments, questions, suggestions? Adrian?
I just wanted to start sort of where we left off last time, and the point's clear, that the micro business has locally generated artificial, like, cap on its ability to function with a 10,000 square foot license, which is the largest one, or the largest one, I think, denoted in the ordinance. Limits you to only 530 pounds of other people's product in one through your business, which is just completely, that's so untenable. That once you've gone and got a manufacturing license and distribution license, cultivation license, literally 500 pounds is one trip for a distributor from your LA. So there's no point in anyone having this license because it makes it impossible to run a consistent consumer packaged good business. You don't have material at that point. And then the other thing that was brought up previously, it was brought to us by some folks who'd like to get micro business licenses but haven't because they're too prohibitive, is that many of the activities under a micro license can be done in RR, self-distribution cannot. And this self-distribution coming and going to your property to pick up the product. So it really isn't adding this other layer of intensity, allowing self-distribution tied to micro business in RR. And I would also consider removing the 500 pound restriction on other people's product. And if you want to come up with some sort of like mellowing agent for the micro business, just tier it to the state's lowest tier of micro business. I would suggest actually that the people who want to apply for micro businesses confirm that, but I would say option that the state's lowest tier, I think, is 2 million in gross revenue. something like that. So you could just tier it to that gross revenue and parallel it to the state, and it would be super clean. And I think that we also see small brands develop. You have autonomy, you've got your ability.
Half of 500 pounds of other cultivators. Is too limiting residential. This is all micro business, so it's already tied to cultivation being allowed in that RR.
Sorry.
And then, if you want a way to adjust this, tie it to the state's lowest tier, and I think you said it was like 2 million, but we'll just say the lowest tier and,
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
yes.
Yes, and if we could just add a similar line item for nursery. If cultivation exists, is there not be any minimum to have, I think. I can't actually.
Is that because a zoning or is it?
Our overlay and under 5 acres, but I haven't read.
I think it's unclassified.
I don't know, or.
That's why.
I think, nursery has to be an egg or
Back one.
industrial SUV.
But it's like, I'm not trying to like. It would be in it's my same impacts, just like the self-transport, I'm not doing anything different except for I can actually set the seed.
Yeah, so I think what Carla's asking for is not to have an auxiliary nursery on the property, but just the ability to obtain a nursery license so she can sell her existing genetics through her existing footprint.
And more specifically, just so I'm clear, so lift on nursery license, or we're moving towards permit, but anyway. Is it specific to a parcel type because it's okay already in others, or is it, this is across parcel types?
It's allowed, it's limited in certain.
Okay, I'll just, we're limited, we're currently limited.
So we did have, some, I think, good discussion last night, about micro business. And so one of the things that we've discussed as a result of that and sort of understanding that, creating micro business with the other license types really provides the ability for small cultivators to vertically integrate and, create more revenue for the businesses. That essentially there may be a way to, in those standalone license types, create some sort of exception or exclusion that specifies that if those license types are part of a micro business operation, then they would have a different set of zoning requirements. And that might be a way to capture, some of the comments that I'm hearing tonight.
And can I just ask a question so I'm clear? I've heard some limited discussion about the difference in the ways that product can be processed, and I know, Carl, especially with yours, I just was trying to get my head around why we would not allow somebody to rinse their product in cold water. But and then I know there's others where it's chemical and other sorts of things. So when we're talking about micro business and processing, are we talking about all kinds of processing or non-volatile, whatever?
So just to clarify the terminology, processing more relates to post-harvest activities that aren't manufacturing.
Okay.
So what she's referring to specifically is the restrictions in place related to manufacturing.
Okay.
But only manufacturing of non-volatile.
Just rinsing it.
Well, I personally was just talking about that specific process, which is is like the lightest part of manufacturing. I think there's other things that fall into that type of manufacturing, but for the purposes of like our discussion around micro business and allowing things that are already part of the same impacts that are already happening. I was talking specifically about the non-volatile extraction type of manufacturing, which we all. So there's a clear definition in the state law for that, and then if you belong to that. And then again, I don't know how this will look in the code, but it's similar to all these others, like self-distro. Where we're not adding a whole other situation to what's there. It's the way the business can vertically integrate and add value to what it produces without creating a whole other. It's within what you're already doing in your operation. In my case, I already have, an ice maker, my scale is this big. People have freezers if they want to, like, there's different ways to do the process. But currently on cultivation, you can only dry sift. So as soon as you cross the line into and washing it in water, that's officially called extraction. Because of that, it falls into this other category, which currently, like, in my case, again, I'm limited to, I can't do that type of manufacturing. But when you look at what it actually is, that doesn't really make sense, but it takes away value added that my business model has.
Thank you.
I guess just
I'm sure they didn't need that education, but it helped
following
me.
up to that, I guess to just keep more money in the county overall, which also allows us to keep better quality control over the product. So that way the end user is able to actually enjoy it better. And so less impact on having multiple distributors coming in and out, and rather you actually have more touch with your end consumer, more like the wine model.
Yeah, I've mentioned before to some people that it struck me when I visited our Cali Love retail center a few times. And, she showed me this little section that is Trinity County branded stuff. Because we have to send all our stuff somewhere else. And then it comes back under somebody else's. And we're anything marketing and branding and economic development, you're trying to build your own brand. And I know Adrian, I think one time you were giving me numbers that you would say if we have this number for what cultivation is worth to the county in terms of income to the people doing the business, multiply it times 3, if all that could stay in play inside the county. So that's the kind of numbers that have been going through my head.
Well, I mean, because part of that also with going back to unfortunate fees, incentives. What are the incentives for legacy growers to stay within the program other than, money going over? And so by having these micro businesses, inviting more tourists into the economy, hopefully then increasing some of the fees that we're able to pay back into the program so that maybe one day we might be able to have a billboard to invite more people up there. So.
And
Yes.
I think I really appreciate what the previous discussions about centralized shared processing.
Oh,
space, that. They're both really great options. We don't want to cut out either option. So I'm just looking at it from like the impact perspective. If there's a way we're talking about land use and power, what we're doing. I know you guys can do that. So when you look at these specific processes, they don't necessarily affect the impact except for on the business scale, on the financial spectrum, on their ability to control the product. So it could bring a huge benefit to streamlining these.
And,
The
go ahead.
issue I see there that we have to come up with the language for is how to separate those simple processes that you're talking about from what the state's licensing. So we can't just say, oh, we're gonna allow this state license type in micro business in our product, because we've had that discussion before. And we've had people that even with the non-volatile extraction were not happy with the idea of having an ethanol extraction in our art because of fire danger and all that. If we can come up with a language of how to separate the simple stuff in a micro business setting, it could work, but that's the political walk we have to do to make it so that people understand what we're talking about is cold water, not ethanol.
You would just allow, or is it because it's the land use, so then you only allow? Wouldn't the county be able to allow cold water, specify that, and then get them type 6 from the state?
Well, that's what I said. We have to come up with that language Because well, it would have to be tied to micro business, because we're not creating.
Absolutely, but that being the limiting factor.
Yeah, and that's what it's, we have,
Yeah.
Drew and I were talking about that, but it's like, if we can tie that to micro business. And earlier when I was making strange faces, I was trying to figure out how you would limit a business by their gross income. Do you just shut the door when you hit 2 million?
You knock up a tier in your next
But if
year.
we limit it to that, if you tie our micro business to that in order to keep. That to me is a political thing, it's not a business thing for you. You're trying to give us a way to make it politically acceptable.
Yeah.
So. I don't see how that works, and there has to be something besides the income, because I would love it if you guys went into, if Carla goes to High and Palm and washes her product in cold water and makes $30 million, I'm more happy. Because nobody, it doesn't.
Carla's like,
Excuse me, there's all of them a lot more money.
So, if. Well, that's another thing, is that, so we can talk about that offline or whatever, but how we make those distinctions between, because the state's definition of micro business in Trinity County, that is not a micro business. That's bigger than any business we have. Maybe the milk brings in that kind of money, but. So we have to make those distinctions, and that's the political part that's difficult, and people don't see those distinctions. They see, this is a micro business, because it's. You can, $2 million is not micro. That's a example.
I just, yeah, to add to that, I mean, I think one of the, there's, you know, we're kind of jumping back and forth between micro business and manufacturing, but on the sort of fee side or the revenue side of micro business at the state level, I would assume that those micro businesses that actually bring in 7 figures of revenue actually are vertically integrated and they have a retail. And that's really what enables them to generate that extra revenue. So that's something that, you know, we've captured those comments and, you know, we're gonna see what can be done to include the ability to actually create vertical integration. But right now, the way the sort of limitations on zoning don't lend to that. And then to the discussion about type 6, you know, non-volatile manufacturing, the dilemma is that if we as the land use authority approve non-volatile manufacturing and get a type 6 license at the state, they're then authorized to do ethanol by the state. So that's the one issue, is I don't know how we would restrict activities that were authorized by the state under that system.
I would just like to clarify, and the type 6, you're allowed to infuse ethanol, which is a cold process. There's no pressure, there's no heat, you're not allowed to use ethanol as an extraction.
And actually, historically, the issue was the storage of massive amounts of ethanol, because it is, then you have to have fire plants that you can't get. So.
Well, we can't have any manufacturing.
And I'm looking at the DCC. And so type 6 non-manufacturers can use non-volatile solvents for extraction or post-extraction processing. Then further down, it goes into non-volatile solvents are that do not produce a flammable gas or vapor, example, ethanol. So the FAQ on the DCC website doesn't necessarily tie in with your understanding, Adrian. So I'm not sure if I need to go deeper into DCC regs to figure that out.
But I think we've got the gist of what you're asking us to do. And I think, as Dan said, he's already trying to think through how would we find a way that would allow what you're asking for and a way that would have the boundaries, if you will, that would allow it to kind of politically move forward. So it's a dance, but I think we've got the gist. And I did want to comment, I'll come back in a minute, but I did want to comment what Carla mentioned. I don't know how many people were familiar with that, but there has been some discussion in some economic development workshops about taking a building that's somewhere near here. I don't know which direction, that way. There's a big incubator warehouse type building, and basically turning that into a type S shared site for this kind of like processing, distribution and so forth. And that, that would be a way where people could, if they couldn't do it on their own properties, at least they would have a place in the county to do it instead of having to go San Diego or wherever, LA, something like that. So I just wanted to explain what that was about. There seemed to be interest in that, and there is a funding source called SURF, which has about economic resiliency. It's possible that that project could, if we're gonna do that, we would have to pull something together by November that kind of spells it out well enough that it could get support from that funding source. So, okay, so do you want to move on? Is there anything else about micro business you want to make sure we capture, Tom?
Um,
Hold on just a second. Okay,
just one comment on the self distro, that calling it, which is really transport. I think that's supposed to be standalone from the conversation about micro business. Because self-transport isn't going to help you really, your micro business doesn't allow the metric tools that you need. I mean, you can live with it. But I think the conversation for micro businesses, you gotta have distro. Anybody, I think anybody with cultivation should have self-storage availability. It's just been a process.
so the people that brought that up, are you in sync with what we're hearing from Tom?
Really, I'm not the person who's interested in it. I wish he was here tonight. He was born last night, but just never didn't quite make it this far.
Okay.
So he would definitely have more details than that.
And Tom, if I'm hearing you right, that if you took this out, this does belong in micro business?
Yeah.
But otherwise, self-distribution should be a subject outside of micro business.
I could have sworn the ordinance allowed any place where there's cultivation to have self.
I think I can help clarify this. So my understanding is that there's essentially three distribution license types essentially at the state. You have a standalone distro that can do all of the distribution activities, have testing, move product to retail. Then you have transport only. And then under transport only, you have transport only self-transport at the DCC level. So what we've done in these proposed changes is to basically tie, because Tom is correct, our ordinance allows for self-transport in association with the cultivation license, but that activity actually requires a DCC transport only self-transport license in order to be able to make transport manifests in metric. So the way that we've captured that is to say that they are authorized to do self-transport with the appropriate state license, which would be the transport only self-transport. I've talked to the DCC about this, and they don't differentiate between transport only and transport only self-transport, except that they charge a lower fee for transport only self-transport versus transport only. So that would be something that would be difficult for us to verify currently with the way DCC is capturing those different, activities.
So I'm hearing you say what the state allows, which sounds like, yes, you can, if you have the right licenses. And I'm hearing from people in the room saying, we can't. Is that because the county does not have an ordinance that supports what the state has?
Well, it's that the county ordinance authorizes self-transport, which isn't a concept that parallels the current DCC license types. And so in order to do self-transport, you need to be able to have that authorization from DCC to create the transport manifest to legally move product from the farm to another location. So the way we've captured it is to say, okay, yes, you are authorized as a cultivator to do what we call self-transport, but we say you must have the applicable state license type, which would be transport, self-transport.
Okay, so I'm just, Basically, it sounds clear as mud to me, but I feel like
It is, I think,
somehow we gotta find a way to align if we wanna allow this to happen.
But when we get down to the brass tacks of the situation. Transport license doesn't get what Tom's asking for, which is district. And so
it only allows you to move
They-
product from the farm.
You drive it to a what do self-transport is drive it to a distributor or manufacturer. You cannot take it to retail. You can't pick up your own pumps.
So what,
But you couldn't, they changed it.
what we're talking about is the need for distribution and micro business.
That's you.
Yeah,
How you're talking about.
So I took out the self and just
Yeah.
put the distribution should be
Yeah,
allowed.
you're not a distributor with self.
I think this.
Even though it's a distribution.
Well, you are, but you're a type 13 instead of a type 11 or a type 11.
Yeah,
instead
it's
of
a
type
13. It's this transport only is a 13. And it. Distribute, but you're not.
Right.
Right.
You're like,
Right.
yeah,
So primarily it's creating a.
right,
of
yeah.
Yeah.
You-
What's
They
that?
package for retail.
What's it,
Certificate of analysis, it's a test, it's state authorized test,
which is
which
really,
is really the function. The primary function of district when we're talking about micro business, because we want to be able to go from farm to consumer.
So
To
the
do that,
question,
you need that test.
the question then would become, how do we make distribution acceptable where micro business is? Politically,
I mean,
Oh,
I have a philosophical question on that.
but, well, is there limitations we can place on it? That makes it so that you can put distro in RR. Because politically, distro is not going into the RR.
Does the general plan update? I was thinking, I'm driving down after our conversation last, I know of only one property in the entire county that I've been to. Where there's a commercial license and it's not the primary use of that property. But that property is already zoned ag. Every other property that's got a license, that's the primary use of that property. Those should be ag or ag plus. So get RR out of here.
The problem is going to be, we're
Farms
gonna
and all
create
that.
height,
Change it.
so, but we don't wanna get stuck in planning land, because that's the planning. But honestly, what I want is. Suggestions of ways, language we can attach to it that would make that unlimited.
I don't,
Yeah.
I don't know what the wording is, but the fundamental issue that has been a problem for all of these years with this zoning conversation. And where should this be? How should this be? Like, I have 640 acres of unclassified land surrounding 4 sides by 4 streets. And in the first years of the ordinance, there was conversations like, we shouldn't have this on unclassified land because it's just not appropriate. Now the conversation, this is possibly the most appropriate piece of land for it. But it's just like, we're talking about micro businesses and like gas storage. If you drive around the county, every gas station stores gas, every gas station stores propane. The feed store has every kind of pressurized gas you could use for anything to light on fire in a shed next to a bar, right? There's more fights and debauchery that have broken out next to the storage of pressurized gas in Hayfork than probably anywhere else in the world, right? So like, we've never had, it's never a realistic conversation. I remember when we were talking about manufacturing, everybody's like, but this is pressurized gas and there's GoPros and there's this, and we're like, well, if you get out of the bottom of Highway 3, there's a massive pressurized gas tank with no security. I don't even think you really have a fence around it. That's gas storage, right? So like, just like, you know, Liz and Duncan stopped being in the cannabis program because of the restrictions it was putting on their property, right? Without cannabis, grow food, process food, sell food, do whatever they wanted to make money on their property. That was in the broadest sense of the, with cannabis on their property, they couldn't do anything. Right, so like, it's, you can, I could go take my 40 acres of our or whatever, and go grow grapes on it, and I could make wine, and I could do whatever the hell I really want. And everyone is gonna applaud it in this county and say, boy, jobs around here, this is great. But if I try to do the exact same physical actions with cannabis, it is a huge political issue, and oh my God, ethanol recently. But that, so from my perspective, the political side of it is, sorry, guys, we allow gas storage with these setbacks, right? You just throw a baseball from the propane tanks at Frontier Fuel or the fuel tanks, and you can hit numerous houses. So I would say that whatever those protocols are, and those setbacks are, and those zoning requirements are, would be appropriate for any cannabis action that requires that, because I gotta be honest with you, there's gonna be less crackheads and tweakers at my cannabis operation than there is at any gas station in Trinity County. So from a political standpoint, there's gotta be some accountability on that side of the table. To say, hey, I understand that you guys fundamentally hate weed, but here's the requirements for everything else that you could ever want to do with this exact same gas in this county. So I guess those should probably be the requirements for cannabis as well.
And then I just want to provide some feedback looking through the current ordinance. Essentially for distribution, you know, I think RR is the main zoning designation that doesn't allow for these additional license types or permit types, but for distribution, it's currently allowed in ag forest would be the two primary ones, but also C2, which is general commercial, C3, which is heavy commercial or industrial, and then manufacturing is allowable in all of those same zoning districts.
That's non-volatile.
For non-volatile,
Yeah, I don't, we.
so,
Allow. That's really nothing.
so for, yeah, for type 7, which is volatile, it's only allowable in C3, which is heavy commercial, industrial, or SUVs whose guidelines specifically identify parcels for industrial development.
Well, I think, you know, if I'm boiling down what I hear and I hear, you know, how do we politically and philosophically and all these other sorts of things, in the long run of it, we have to find a way to educate ourselves collectively with the information that supports a decision that we're trying to make. So in your example, Jake, if the same kind of chemicals can be stored and implemented and transported and something whatever in a similar way, this close to X or Y or Z, then why would that be okay here and not here? And if, you know, and so things like that. And I think that's just a part of, we have to get the clarity and the education so that people can be clear. And then there's still people going to bring their baggage and their perspectives on one side or the other. But we have to get those kinds of, I think, really strong examples that help people understand the stuff that I know you guys have made for years, but the restrictions on us are so much greater than any other use of land and so on and so forth.
There's nothing new in cannabis from a gardening standpoint. There's new marketing to people to buy stuff in drugstores for 10 times as much, but there's nothing new. So like, it's the same thing as like operating a cannabis business. There's nothing new than any other ag business out there. It's just a new conversation.
Carl?
So I just have two quick points. I think probably the solution about this meeting. That's makes a lot of sense, especially on recapping all this again about some we need probably the best solutions. But I think we can figure out, I want to think about how do we define the limiting factors for distribution in these situations. We're currently not, because what I'm looking for. How can I don't think we increase my traffic. I don't know. I don't think you, how do we define that? And that's what people.
I'm hearing from you, I don't know if it's gonna be the same from everybody that's applying for micro business. What you're talking about to me is like a farm to fork type of thing. But we don't know, if we don't farm to fork, but it's, you want to be your own full scale, just micro business. You want to do everything yourself. Some other folks that apply for micro business, that might not be their business model. And so we have to try to find a way that we can allow this business model, but not allow something that isn't going to fit and is going to cause an absolute blow up in the county, and people are going to be suing us.
Looking at what else is allowed, like, you're unclassified, right?
I am.
I'm unclassified as well. We have the whole conversation with my CUP about how much traffic is gonna be to go up and down on my road, right? And finally, I got to the point that I said, less than if I log it. And I'm allowed to log it without doing pretty much damn thing in unclassified. It literally. We're logging. So like, that's the impact. She could property, it would have a greater impact in her driving seats down there.
What if we limited it, say, to the existing footprint? Because a lot of these could happen in the same footprint that's there for cultivation. You know, all you need is really a desk. And if manufacturing is part of it, whatever the manufacturing part. That we're in a controversial zone. I'm not talking about somebody who's on, you know, 40 acres of ag forest that wants to do micro business. But if you're on 5 acres of RR, keep it in the space you've already got there. All we're talking about is different codes on the computer, really. And you're still handling the same product. It's still going away.
But then you'd be bringing in other people's maybe, but if it's allowable, and that's the political, that's like where people get. But if you, and then I can see the neighbors, if it's hard, then you just rezone the cultivator ad in an RR. I don't.
Create an island of that.
Well,
Yeah, no, I
just
think
agree.
yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
They create stuff, and then the rest of just go with the non-conforming use.
Yeah.
And that's,
Yeah,
seems what's there.
Yeah.
It's,
That will be discussion that we have when we get to our zoning ordinance.
Used for it. John.
But it can kind of be that overlay like we're talking about, but none of that is freedom. They've been collecting feedbacks, they being the consultants, bringing it back to us. And right now, those vision, guiding principles, the community plan areas and the boundaries of those community plans is all going to the planning commission in like 6 weeks. So that's where feedback can and should be shared. It's already been asked for in surveys and community meetings and so forth, but there's nothing that I see in what's been documented that says we want to be a retirement community. What else do you guys want to talk about? The only other thing, well, unless there's more in the micro business, the other thing I saw here, I guess it was somebody online said acre grows, but they're not here, I guess. But do people here want to talk about acre grows? Because we're not gonna shift to an online conversation. Okay, so I heard stacking. You want to talk about start?
I'll start, bring it up, make it.
Yep.
Stacking new 1A, B. Stack licenses must comply, blah, blah, blah. All right, C, project sites that wish to stack more than one cannabis permit per parcel will remain under 10,000 square feet total canopy. Will not be required to apply for a use permit. That's great. Because assuming they're already approved for 10,000 square feet, they just want to mix it up. So if you're already approved for an acre, can you just mix it up in that acre?
Is that how, I don't know, how, let's first answer the question how it's written and then we can talk about.
We might have to massage the language to make it stay under the existing footprint. Which I wouldn't see an issue with that.
Right, and the concept as I see it is we're talking less than or greater than, so, you know, that stacking multiple licenses on an existing 1 acre isn't addressed, but I've taken note of your comment there.
Thank you. And then,
Just actually one more thing though, is that because the 1 acre licenses have received a use permit, it likely is gonna have to continue forward through the use permit track because likely would be a modification of some sort to their use permit. So that would probably be the reason that it doesn't lend itself as easily and why we landed on, you know, small licenses as
if you could
less than stack.
open the door a little bit in the ordinance.
It will just be a modification, and so
Modify, and I'm pretty sure stacking was addressed in. We didn't know what it was gonna look like or when it was gonna happen.
so likely it would be, you know, some sort of either minor or major modification depending on when, then potentially, you know, updates to the environmental document depending on what was trying to be accomplished.
And before we go on, just make sure I captured, I said ability to add stack license types. Footprint should be allowed. Okay.
Along that same line of thinking on already approved. Square footage a lot. Can we just get one county license that says you're good here? For 10K, like one license. 10K, I don't care what we do. 10K of cultivation space. We're allowing that, so somebody doesn't have to buy. Gonna keep going, somebody's just, and not that I wanna do this, but, so somebody doesn't have to buy 2,500 square foot indoor licenses for their 10K.
But I guess what I heard was. Can you just say, you can do whatever of things with one permit for that
You
square
got one
footage.
permit for 10K.
But aren't there very different requirements for what you do with that 10K? And that's why we have.
Sure, you're still required to do.
But then okay, so you're saying as you wanted to do
I'm saying
different.
not a 10K outdoor, not a 10K mixed light, not a 10K
Okay.
indoor, I'm just saying 10K.
Okay, so Drew, any comments about that?
I would say that it's certainly something we could consider. You know, it's definitely not, it's not structured in that way currently, but I follow.
So
what
I don't
you're
have to
saying.
get two county licenses and do two different things.
Then it wouldn't count as stacking, well, like the numbers, because part of the conversation for stacking is if you two licenses
You're gonna
stacked.
get the 530 cap.
It hits 530 cap, and that doesn't mean they're two 10,000 square foot licenses.
I could already get mix and match different state licenses in my 10K or acre. Not indoor, but not tier 2, but I could get a mixed light for the outdoor. And I did that with my old 10K. I swear it was wild.
And they don't allow it, because that would be considered stacking. Right now.
But that's what for discussion,
Right.
They found that. Yeah, that was match.
But what I'm hearing you say is you would like us to consider a single multi-use permit.
Yes. That
Okay.
sounds good.
Tom,
And
Good at that.
I mean, I kind of like that because if anybody stacks beyond an acre, gonna get stacked licenses from the state, you're gonna get a lot. So we're gonna have a stacked Trinity. It's the exact opposite of how it was. We had a 1 acre Trinity County license and stacked for state 10,000 of them. Now we're gonna have, say, 6 Trinity 10,000s, and you're gonna call large from the state. But whatever it is, the question comes down to carrying capacity of the land use. And this is another question where we're gonna come back. Just because it's like, okay, not new. I think, when we talked about this a little, but the existing ordinance establishes a ratio that's reasonable. And by reasonable, I mean, it's made it so far and it's caused grumbles, but nobody's really gone crazy. 50 acre minimum to the 1 acre. If you do the math on that, that's 2%. So if you say everybody can get a 10,000 wherever cannabis is out. Beyond that, you can stack up to 2% of your land. Does that favor larger parcels? Obviously it does. But the reason it does is because the carrying capacity of the larger parcel is greater than the carrying capacity of the 5 acre parcel, for instance. A 5 acre flat might be better than, for instance, my 80 acre hillside. No question. However, that's what the use permit process is for. There's ag land. It could probably be a different thing, but if we use a ratio like that, we don't create this mad dash where everybody's going to try and get 10,000 and all the neighborhoods you think we've got settled on this. It's great. Other ones can have double or triple in size. I'm not saying they shouldn't have to do that if the land is appropriate, but having something that comes across less shocking to everybody. We're already kind of used to thinking of this 50 acre minimum for 1 acre. Having stack, I think makes sense. There's no point to have licenses sitting there while there are people with licenses that could do it. That only makes sense to allocate them. And I think it invariably ends up relating to the size of the parcel, just because of the way the impact. So I think wrong. It's really going to be right.
in about 1,000 different ways.
Yeah.
Now, granted, there are grossly more than 10,000 square foot, but. And Drew, I don't know the instance, completely time acre. I don't believe that there's been a single community problem with an acre foot in the 5 years now that we've had that. Because they're on, there's setbacks, there's acres, there's whatever, right? Those pieces, it makes sense. There are 1,000 things about the acre grow ordinance, but it's the right placement. It doesn't have to do necessarily with what zoning your property is in Trinity County, because Lord knows it's probably zoned wrong. But as far as just like looking at it rationally, like, hey, here's the huge field with no neighbors.
Wait, I could probably have more weed. No, it's not, it's not wrong.
Well, and so, I mean, we have this setback language, right, and variances and all that we're trying to move away from and have buffer zones, and we've talked about going through a process by which at least those buffer zones become high. So I'm trying to cultivate within my example of small parcel. Not only do I have to have this buffer from adjoining buildings and so forth on next property, but I also have to be less than 2% of my land. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think. And maybe if it's ag, you can have a higher percentage.
1,000 square feet is 2% of what size?
It's a quarter acres, so. It's 2% of really.
We have a lot of cultivation that's on less than.
Yeah.
That's, he's talking only for stacked licenses. So if the 10Ks, we've
Okay.
already went through that.
Okay.
In this proposed, whatever you want to call it, draft, I'm pretty sure that there is an exclusion that says you can't get a buffer reduction for a stacked license.
Yeah.
So if you're going to stack, you can't get a buffer reduction. You have to be able to, which was one of our initial ways of trying to put it where it should be. One of the things I've considered is don't allow stacking in RR because it's not a new fight. We've had this fight starting in 2015, 16, whenever I started hearing that. Everybody, the fight has always been over RR. So if we don't allow stacking in RR and we make it only on the larger parcels, then I think we have an opportunity to maybe not have a wreck with stacking. Maybe it goes through a document, right?
If I wanted to rezone, is that analogous to like CUP or is it more like a subdivision process?
We don't have Bella, so I'm not sure. I know if you try to do anything like that in Trinity County, it's measured in years.
Yeah.
Just because we don't have staff.
So one question that had come up to me was when you talked about this thing where when we've been having discussions, we said wherever these buffer zones become, there is no variance, like you said, there's no exceptions to the buffer zones when you stack. You don't even ask. But here's another question. So if I currently I have to have a buffer zone of 350 feet for what I'm doing today. Do I now have to be 500 feet because I'm growing more? And does that affect my existing, which is 350 feet away?
At the point you get to an acre, you would have to have the expanded buffer. And I think in our draft, Drew, it actually, I think when we get 10,000 when we start. I don't remember if that actually.
So I think the way that we have stacking structure. It's on page 11, but essentially, once you go past 10,000 square feet, it's gonna be, the way it's proposed is there would be a director's use permit, and once you go over 20,000 square feet, it would be a conditional use permit.
But then I might be wrong with this, right? So like in my CUP for the acre, because it's setbacks, I have a garden site that's like 60 feet from the property line. But it's literally miles of wilderness for the next private parcel. But I still have to do a variance with every, so it's stacking. My point being, this is a property that's a square mile. And like, the setback are insanity, right? It physically does not even work on 640 acres. But like, my point is these buffer zones and saying like the bigger you get, there's non-negotiables with it. Well, like, there's not a one size fits all in this town. So like,
And one thing with the buffers, I'm not sure about. I think that fact required, correct. So there's a difference between a 1 acre setback and a buffer is measured to your neighbor. Setback requirement for 1 acre was actually a setback requirement, the way it was codified. So that
Measure two for non forest.
a buffer would be the
So the next
next
house.
But the setback requirement for your type 1 would still be this, or type 3 would still be the setback requirement. Because unless we,
In discussions. With. Was that pretty much every sentence.
yeah, well,
And
because
most for hundreds of acres.
we set, that setback requirement was 500 feet, correct? From the property line. Well, 500 feet. Setback is that. Over 2 acres away from your property line. So that is,
When we did the math, we figured out you had to look like the dead side of the property.
you could fit it in the very center of a 50-acre parcel.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Just want to be clear on a couple things. So, so the buffer zone increase when you go 10 to 20 was that.
To the buffer.
So
So
you,
there's no ability to do a buffer reduction.
okay,
So
so,
the full distance of the buffer.
so if it's 350 for that terminology, if you're adding another 10,000, that also has to be 350 away.
The crapshoot.
It should be whatever you use.
Which unclassified with cannabis signs should definitely be added something.
Yeah, maybe.
Are you saying that stacking should only be allowed on ag? Is that what you're saying?
No, my concern was
An
that 2%
exception.
might include that. Because that would mean.
It should probably be
Like the
higher
vast
than that.
Yeah.
I would think, like,
So-
if it's dedicated ag land,
You
there
could
should be
use
5%.
on or.
Okay. Okay, so I have, one, we kind of started with use similar ratios like 2% of land. Then a concern that this would be could be too limiting. And that maybe the follow up to that is an exception could be granted for ag land. Did I capture what you're saying? Is there anything else you wanted to say about it?
An exception, but a higher percentage of land coverage. Which,
Higher percent usage.
With all the buffers
Okay,
being the same.
yes, ma'am.
So just, okay.
think the 2-year-old version, but. If somebody,
I'll concentrate.
if somebody already has a permit and, but they also did need variance or reduction on their buffer, then they just can't stack up, because they've already got a buffer reduction.
So yeah, if I'm at 250 because I got this before and now I want to stack, do I have to move back?
The way it's written, I don't think you would be eligible for a stack permit because.
I just wanted.
I guess if
Yeah.
it would be site specific, because in some cases, the need for a CCV or what would in the future be a buffer reduction is based on the current configuration versus if they were proposing expansion, but moving, let's say, away from the neighbor on the other side of their cultivation operation, then they may not. But then you bring up a good point, which is that what does that mean for the buffer reduction that's been approved for the existing configuration? And if they're adding an additional one, then are they basically
Yeah, I mean,
out
you
of
have it
luck?
written into the ordinance now, but you can't.
So yeah, it's like we would need to be clear, whichever way we would go with it. If you can not create an exception in buffer with stacking, but you could retain one or not,
Right?
whichever way that went. But be clear, yes.
What if the need for your buffer reduction is another posted?
Yeah, so it's just-
And that may be because it's like.
That's the whole point.
You're saying-
And when you're excluding something like that, every site, like there are licensed cultivators that have. Probably the pines have 4 legal grows on their speed, right? Or a licensed cultivator that has another licensed cultivator next door. I don't think the buffer zone is required for it. But by excluding it. Right off the rip, there's no, I guarantee you, there's gonna be somebody that says, hey, I just got screwed, my neighbor. Is licensed, and I'm licensed, and now I can't stack even though I've got 80 acres. Because their gardens right here.
I follow your concern, except that I want to say that, and I can pull it up and reference it specifically to give me a second, but. The way that there are exceptions to the buffer reduction process, and so we've tried to capture that. The exceptions to the buffer reduction would be for cultivator to cultivator. A dwelling built after the approval of that configuration. So if that helps to clarify for you, Jake.
And another one that I maybe you can address this, if you own the parcel next to you. Because I know with building,
You
It
don't have to
doesn't-
have, you don't have to have a buffer to yourself. It's like that.
it says it, right?
You don't have to have a buffer for your own.
So what I wrote down there is we need to be clear on what our approach or criteria is when an existing operation uses an exception and wants to stack it. What do we do about that? And then it sounds like it's very kind of specific to the, what am I next to? Will I be going further away? Would it be stacking? But we just need to be clear, so it's not a gray area when we get to the point where people are applying.
And then the other aspect of what you were talking about, Jake, it doesn't matter what we come up with. There's going to be a parcel in Trinity County that's gonna get screwed.
100%.
That's part of
They're
the,
probably sitting in this room.
this whole process that. You can't make it work for everyone. I've seen it not happen a lot of times. So what we have to try to figure out is the best way to do it, so. That's.
I'm in full agreement. I think everyone here just wants a little more down the middle than it's been for 7 years.
8:05. We've talked about the things you've had on the list so far. Do you want to tackle something else?
Yeah.
Well, before we go on, I just have one last comment on the 2% of land thing. I don't know if we were talking about that specifically the stacking or.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Cause I have a very small square footage and I have a small parcel and I would have. I was either shit or the person should out of the street. So, and
No, that,
Yeah.
that is specifically, and that's not in the ordinance, that was just Tom's
I
suggestion.
know.
Tom's trying to get the great Tom compromise.
Yeah, and so, yeah, when Tom was raising that, we put it in, under stacking. And then we also talked about, that it could be too limiting, so on an ag property, then maybe it's a higher percentage. And then, you had this kind of separate but related thing that said, use the general plan to rezone farms to ag where it makes sense. So that rural residential could go to ag and unclassified could go to ag where it makes sense from the general use planning, and then that would fall under that criteria. So it's a puzzle.
That's a long way down the road.
Yeah, and I mean, that might come down a little later, but. You know,
It does.
we're visiting here.
I know, that's like 12 down here, rezoned, but what's up?
Anything else?
I've got two kind of shortish things that I just want to bring up. One was, I don't think in the meetings where we really got into the buffers and the setbacks and the overlays and all that, the effect of the new enforcement language in the program was adequately discussed. So whenever there's an opportunity to do that with maybe your constituents or another meeting, just reinforce the idea that the enforcement will hit like the permanency of buffers. There's a lot of resistance to the permanency of buffers, but now we're building in more stringent and more enforceable language. So that's a mitigation for the permanency of those buffers.
And Andrew, if I can just comment on that, so to your point, we did hear some feedback about that, and what people were basically saying is this idea of instead of every year, if you have a quote variance, and even if it's now called a buffer zone, instead of that having to be revisited because you have an exception every year, that it would just become permanent, and then you don't have to worry about that every year, and you can rely on the fact that you invested and you can keep doing it. Some people said, well, wait, we were comfortable with that approach when we had an opportunity every year. But now maybe we have some experience. We want one last chance was one of the examples. So it'd be like, okay, go through one more cycle where you give people a chance and then it becomes permanent. That was what I was hearing as one solution.
I think that was a compromise concept that was
Yeah.
proposed and sort of parallels are, what we have established currently as a result of the resolution to waive the CCD requirement for this calendar year. We would use the consent opposition letter concept as part of converting from previously approved CCDs to buffer reductions, so that in that conversion process, that consent opposition letter would go out. And then if that was opposed, it would go to the PC for a hearing for the buffer reduction, and for projects that don't receive any neighbor opposition, they would go forward with just the administrative approval of the buffer reduction.
And I don't know what has all come in emails, but Adrian, don't remember anybody after that option was presented, anybody saying, absolutely not, I could never support that.
Right.
So it seemed like people kind of thought, kind of makes sense, but let's have this one safety net thing,
Sure.
is what I heard. So go ahead, you had one other thing, and then.
If the folks are not following their mitigations or, light pollution, and whatnot, then although you wouldn't be challenging the buffer at that point, you'd be filing a complaint, and that complaint would be against their permit,
Right.
which is, equally has equal gravity to it at that point.
Yeah.
So, which could happen anyway.
Yeah.
But I take what you're saying, but I didn't feel when I listening to it, that was clearly not expressed.
And
And so-
actually, I have my notes from that discussion that says that they would be okay with it if the mitigation measures are implemented and enforced. So
Excellent.
that's
That's
the
what
main thing is, as much as we hate them to get there, the enforcement that we're gonna have to get to make the antis not anti.
No, I think that's something that in many ways, even from the cultivators, one of the things we're missing, because we carry a lot of people who don't act properly. And so if they can't follow on.
Actually, most of the complaints I've got in the last year have been controlled.
On other cultivators? About other cultivators?
Yeah, about the guys that aren't in the program, they send me, it's like, hey, look, this guy's blowing up his greenhouses.
Right,
and
it's driving us all insane.
I can't do this, or there's friggin' lights on all night.
Yeah. I agree with that. I think the lights are atrocious. And the only other thing I wanted to mention is in the non-conforming thing in the county code, it cites that you lose, after a year, you lose, your state. Like if you don't use your license for a year, permit for a year as non-conforming, then you lose your non-conforming status and you're just out. That's from the county code, and so the state.
Existing or proposed?
That's.
That's in county code.
That's not,
Oh, okay,
That's the
okay,
county
go ahead.
conforming.
that's why there's no storm wild.
Yeah.
Okay.
That,
Right.
the state allows recently for a fallowing program, which is actually in sometimes in agriculture, like, for instance, 2 years ago, the rice people got paid $50 million to not cultivate for a year because of water. We have fires, people have health issues. There's any number of reasons why somebody may choose to fallow under a state program, which reduces their license fees. They still get inspected. They can't grow. They can push through any material that they have into the commercial market. We've never had a fallowing program here. I know that Mendocino and Humboldt have both started them. It hasn't felt like the proper time to bring that up as we're trying to fill licenses. But the fact of the matter is if I were to, like, I don't know, be injured in a car accident or something and be unable to cultivate for a year, I would appreciate that be readdressed through possibly a fallowing ordinance that would then create an exception to the non-conforming code section.
And yeah,
So-
Now's the time to do it.
In this ordinance, yeah.
So Adrian, on the first one, what I said is acknowledge that this shift to permanent buffer zones is kind of protected by enhanced enforcement. That was
Right.
part of the point you were trying to make, and
Yeah.
then also this other stuff. And then here, consider a fallowing approach that would support what you're using as an
Right.
example of,
Well,
it's not that somebody's just kind of like, yeah, I'm just tying this up for years and you can't do anything to me. I have a reason to do this, and should we have an allowance for that?
Right.
Okay, go ahead. Anything else?
Nope.
Jake, did you have your hand up? Oh, yes, sir.
So with regards to following in regular agriculture, they have rotational crops. There's a crop rotation that's glaringly absent in cannabis. So, it's every 7 years. You're really making money, give your soil the rest, every 7 years. I'm not suggesting that, but, if there is a fit for a rotational crop, of course, it needs to be worth, $500 a pound. There aren't many of those crops. So, the lack of a rotational crop is limiting. So, and that reflects on the need for fallowing. Could make it worse or better, but, we're in a unique situation because it's a crop. Jake, they do have a tremendously protected part of agriculture. It's called US forestry. They own 85% of the county with them in BLM, and they pay 0 property taxes. But yeah, it's highly restrictive, and supposedly it's an ag crop. The problem here is they don't sell enough trees. Yes, they could be much more.
Okay.
And,
Have we worn you out?
oh no, sat too long without talking.
I have a question about something Adrian brought up about, the whole thing about the buffer zone setbacks, giving people 1 more year
Oh,
to say we don't want. Maybe you're getting something that's like, and this doesn't affect me, but I've just watched how people, the neighbors who are against weed, yeah, and it occurs to me that some folks might be like, wait, this is our last chance, we better appeal this. Like, if you have a license for 3 years or better, and you've never, and you still have a license, you're in good stand. Maybe we say, you prove that your approved variance here has been respectful, has worked, whatever.
Mhm.
Then cool, you're grandfathered into now whatever the new thing is. If you have only had a variance take more stuff off the planning commission's plate too, because I think there's still, God knows how many CUPs and stuff in the queue waiting for hearing and whatnot.
Okay.
So, talking about pitch count. Like, if you've just already proved for 5 years or 3 years or better that you're good, why do we need to add this stuff again? We're saying we don't need this stuff in the future, so why now? But if it's only been 2 years, hey, maybe give them a chance, you know?
Well, that's a,
Just looking to streamline things more, really, you know?
and most of the people who have been growing for 4 or 5 years on a CCB would probably have their neighbor sign off and say, yeah, this is okay. Because if that neighbor was one of the people that was going to try to shut you down because of smell, they would have already done it. So.
Maybe, until you tell them, hey, it's your last chance. There's a lot of things that I don't do today, but if you tell me I don't have a chance to do it tomorrow, I probably make it bigger priority. I mean,
Can I add just one other perspective on that? I think it was something that somebody brought up in one of those kind of meetings, but they were like, okay, I'm the neighbor, I'm not the cultivator. And I hear, I've been noticed that my neighbor is gonna do something different with its cultivation, and so I'm gonna, okay, let's just see how this goes. And what their point was, if you give them this automatic variance, but then a year goes by and they're like, I really didn't, that really made a big difference in my situation, that they should have that one more chance to say, no, I thought I was gonna be okay with this, but for whatever reason they come up.
And does that have to do with like new development?
I don't. Yeah.
Right, so what it was, so if I go ahead and invest my entire life savings. Again, which to be clear, I know everybody thinks it's a ton of money in weed, but like, I've done this. I think I still have a sweatshirt from the Emerald Cup that says, I swear, babe, this is the last year we're gonna be.
Yeah. But everything is a risk.
100%, but there's virtually no other business out there.
That
The
your
neighbor
neighbor
can just
can
say,
check out.
"Oh, I don't like weed."
So what I've got here is I've got consider criteria for allowing automatic conversion to permanent and consider criteria for opposing conversion to permanent. So if we tried to make it a little more clear, like Jake, your example was, I've been a perfect cultivator, no complaints, no violations, no nothing for 3 years, and so I automatically get converted. And then the other thing would be, this is the criteria. If you want to oppose Jake's become permanent, then these are the kinds of things that can be used as reasons, and other stuff can't. Trying to do for appeals. So trying to, that's what I'm hearing is I'm hearing, how can we try to make that a little less emotional? It was interesting. One of the things I thought was interesting, one of the comments said, well, I allowed this in the past. And I had to be really clear and say, none of us are allowing anybody to do anything on their property. We can oppose, we can support, we don't allow or not allow. A board or a board or a planning commission, but a board or a planning commission can, but us as individuals, we can oppose, we can support. And I was just trying to make that point because people, it almost sounded like they really thought, well, I allowed this, but I don't know if I continue to allow it. And I just want to say, well, you can say you supported, and now you don't know if you want to continue to support, but let's be clear, you didn't allow or disallow.
Right, but so the way you just pitched that though, is now, it's say I'm an against growing for whatever reason, and from what I've seen over the years, most of them are like personal reasons. It's not like, hey, I don't like this is really impacting my property. It's like, hey, I just don't like growers. I don't like this, I don't like that. So if that's your view, which now you know that there's at least one person out there who that is adamantly their view.
Sure.
And you're telling them now, are you gonna allow this forever? Or are you not gonna allow? Because you've only been allowing it year by year, and I still got the power the next year. Okay, maybe he helped me out, he gives me water this year, whatever. But you now know that in your mind, that there are people out there who they truly believe. So now you're giving them the opportunity. Are you gonna allow Carla to do this forever?
Well, first
It's
of all,
a different question than are you gonna allow Carla to do this one more year?
absolutely.
And now you know that people have that in their brain.
Yeah, no, and so I agree, except the one thing is the word allowed doesn't belong anywhere in that sentence.
No, but that's
I hear you, but that's the reason why I took from input from the group. So have criteria that says, hey, there should be no reason. I have no variance, I've done everything right, no, any problems. Is there some criteria why I should just automatically get approved? Maybe not, I don't know. But then criteria for opposing, not allowing or disallowing, but criteria for opposing. So it can't just be, I don't really like it. Or, we hear, I mean, I've been hearing this stuff from Drew and Bella about the number of appeals that they've had to deal with. That is, they kicked my dog. They wouldn't let me buy their land. I don't, what, all these things that are like, that is not a valid reason for appeal. And so can't we take a similar approach is what I'm hearing, to this, so that it gets, if we are going to have this one last shot, what should the criteria be for it? So we're just trying to find ways that,
Shut up, real violation.
yeah, so one way or another, we just need to find our way. One, what are we gonna do? And then how would we do it? And this is trying to help us understand that.
And I think Tom had a great proposal in last night's meeting in terms of, kind of clarifying the two main different types of appeals. One is a sequel related appeal, when we're noticing the NOD versus a sort of code related appeal. Where I don't know that we can really establish, and you correct me if I'm wrong, Tom, but I don't know if we can really establish appeal criteria related to the sequel appeal side of things. But I think that we can establish criteria for appeals related to the rest of county code requirements.
Anything else? Are you ready to go home? Andrew's like, please, can we go home?
I think Dan was.
Tom doesn't want to let you go home yet. What is it, Tom?
And since we're being philosophical and visionary here. Trinity Pond. We should do a supplement to the programmatic EIR. And create a unique Trinity Pines licensing program. It could be ministerial. 5K or 10K, whatever it is, but we've spent a lot of collective energy trying to make the ordinance fit a subdivision like Trinity Pines and a subdivision like Buckhead. And here we are, but
I thought there's an exception, you don't need a permit for Trinity Pines, right?
there's a mechanism. Our EIR doesn't cover it as it's written, but it gets us a long way in that direction. We could make something, keep Trinity Pines from becoming a Superfund site. And also make it way more accessible than the criteria we have now. It's more appropriate for like some of these RR type neighborhoods in JC. And I'm not saying we put it in this ordinance, but we got a brain trust here. So be thinking about that. If we're gonna rezone RR, let's make a Trinity Pines licensing program.
I wonder if we took the Trinity Pines agents to get licensing Pines land here, how much better our fines would be.
What, Dan?
So Trinity Pines gets a community plan, hopefully, so they can talk
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah, that's the plan.
But I've had that discussion in the past with other people. I don't even know who all I talked to about that. I know I had that discussion in Post Mountain. The only way to address Post Mountain is if we do a Post Mountain specific EIR.
Yeah.
Jeff doesn't want to pay for it, so we have to figure out how to get that EIR funding for Post Mountain. And that's,
I bet there's money out there like Fish and Wildlife for.
and one grant funding possibly, and then the other thing. My take on the EIR funding that you guys don't want to pay, understandably. I think that also should come out of like our settlement agreements. Settlement agreements, they have to pay attorney's fees. We can make them pay an EIR update fee and then make them pay their fee. They're fine. So there are ways we can try to squeeze some of the people that are making it so we need an EIR to pay for the
That's a
EIR.
good idea.
But I think that Post Mountain is going to need a supplemental or a standalone. I actually think it's gonna be a standalone EIR because it's just its own world.
Could be, and I you could just bring in the parts of the programmatic we have that fit, but
Yes.
yeah, I mean, there's so much there that you could cover, but we could leave it alone, but it's not gonna like get better.
No, and it doesn't fit in with, the configurations of the parcels of Post Mountain do not fit anything in our ordinances, because they're just too small and they're too close together. And
There's no opposition.
well, it's just, it doesn't work for how it's set up. And I think that it needs its own EIR anyway to see what is the carrying capacity of
Right,
Post Mountain,
yeah.
because I think we've surpassed it.
Yeah.
And then we have to figure out how to work with that. That's not gonna happen overnight. We're not gonna do that in this ordinance. It is something that I've been talking to people in Post Mountain about some, and I've been talking to people in the county about.
It is interesting that
Put that on the list after rezoning RR.
I got it there. Separate but related, we've been talking to a couple of different organizations about the possibility of getting grant funding to do environmental cleanup of illegal operations in the county. And in my mind, at least, a lot of that has been focused on the Post Mountain area, just because my understanding is that there are a lot of them there. And the idea is that if those could be cleaned up, then they become useful land again for whether it's home building, it's farming, it's for whatever. But right now, they're just some really need a big cleanup that nobody can afford to do.
just so you know, the only thing that land will ever be used for that has any economic value, or that anyone will ever pay to do it. Nobody's gonna come and spend money to build a house there and live this beautiful, I lived there, Adrian lived there, it's grossly different now than when we lived there. But like, it's, I've said since the beginning of this program, the county, like, Tom loves to say the super whatever fun site.
Super fun site.
Yeah, what, the only hope of pivoting that place is to truly entice somebody to spend a ton of time, money and effort to make multiple sites into farms. That is a totally different picture than we have in the ordinance, but it is, I can tell you from sitting, I'm on LAFCO, and when we're just going through roads and fire department stuff up there, and listening to the numbers that were thrown out of what the average income is for a resident in Trinity Pines, I was so happy that Zoom froze because I couldn't hold my shit together. Because it is the most impoverished part of Trinity County, but I can also tell you it is per square meter, the highest economic driver this county has ever had, and probably will ever have, and we've missed the entire level. I shouldn't say we, some of us did, but the county has.
Yes, ma'am.
I have a question. If the Post Mountains needed their own EIR, then could we, or could the county creative, like a separate requirements for those smaller parcels to get the license?
That would be
So
why
there-
we would need a separate EIR, is to be able to allow stuff in Post Mountain that we can't allow with what we've analyzed now. So it doesn't fit, and I actually went to the PUD meeting a while ago and talked to some folks there, and it's like to get the type of grows that they're looking for in Post Mountain right now, the only way you could really do it would be if you started consolidating parcels.
Or incorporated.
I mean, the current.
You can.
Exception.
But some people doesn't have the fundings to do, consolidations. And some parcel are like they only own one parcel, so it will be hard for those farmers to consolidate or to buy the other your neighbor out. So having a separate EIR and a loan, it will allow those individual parcel, the smaller parcel, instead of getting a 10,000 square feet, they would just get like 2,500 square feet or 5,000 square feet, and will be a separate requirements from the rest of the county. That way allow them to continue growing, and we also get them to the program, and we also get them to pay for the fee. It will be a benefit win-win situations for the residential at the Pine Coast Mountain and the county as well.
Yeah, that would be the plan.
I'm not sure I understand.
That's pretty funny.
It's that a EIR takes a long time,
Uh-huh.
and then you would have to craft an ordinance, so that's something that we're gonna. We'll have to,
Like 5 years, 3 years?
it shouldn't take that long, but it's Trinity County.
So we've tried to take into account the, you know, the small parcel size in Trinity Pines with the exceptions to the buffer. The new buffer reduction concept, or buffer table. So the cultivator to cultivator, I think would be one that would really be helpful for Trinity Pines, because without that, you know, it's unlikely that the majority of those cultivation sites, they're either, you know, next to, you know, within that buffer set, that buffer requirement from another house. Or so that's what we've tried to do. The only other thing that I can think of, and, you know, this is just my idea off the top of my head, is that there might be the potential to leverage, GoBiz equity funds to establish an equity overlay zone for Trinity Pines, and some of those fees, you know, would potentially cover the cost of that EIR. But I don't know that, given the way that it's all set up on a sort of per applicant basis, I'm not so sure that we would be able to qualify such a large project, you know, under the current terms or restrictions of the use of GoBiz equity funds going forward.
What's the EIR cost?
I want to say when we looked into, the cost from, I had it written down, I want to say it was roughly $500,000, 400 some $1,000.
I bet if we really had the stomach for it, we could find that money from Fish Law and or the water board. Just because 266, what they saved.
Right, I mean, the issue right now with like the way the qualified cultivator grant is set up is that it's on a per project, sort of per site basis. So it would basically be doing one application for every parcel, which obviously that's 1,000 applications, which currently the county does not have the staff to.
Yeah, but there's gotta be money out there.
Can we open it up and have all of those farmers apply, categorize them as they are needing an EIR, and then we will get all of these and we'll do one proposal to get those funding for the EIR instead of do individual. So we have like 1,000 or 2,000 parcels here at Post Mountain, and we're gonna project this, proposing this grant to come in to help do an EIR for all of this farmers.
I don't know the
Whereas-
details of, you know, the terms and conditions of the qualified cultivator grant, but my understanding is that it's on a per parcel or per project basis. So again, it may be possible that if you had a significant number of people in Trinity Pines, possibly that, you know, developing an EIR for Post Mountain could be leveraged from that grant opportunity, but the issue is just that, you know, the grant funding is done on a per parcel or per project basis. So I honestly.
$266 a parcel. I'm just saying for like, I know it's impossible to get anybody to do anything in the community, but if the people in Trinity Pines, it's super motivated. They come with $266 a parcel, it pays for the,
And if you can find the nonprofit to help do that, then amazing.
That would be a better use than giving it to code enforcement.
maybe Barcelona could do it.
Problem.
I mean, actually, it would be far better for anything you could call an impact from cannabis than anything to code enforcement
Well,
officers.
technically, then it would actually be this.
I mean, we could do a lot with that. You make a very clear checklist for licenses, so it's not like staff has to evaluate 1,000 of the appendix Cs. You make it, these are the terms, just like 3 conversion kind of thing. It's not gonna be nothing, but it's streamlined.
Like if the EIR is done correctly, it'd be essentially like a new security.
Exactly.
Tell Saxon we're gonna need that $500,000 back
Yeah.
before we define.
Yes, sir.
Sounds right, thinking correctly, you fix this water board, this, ain't like they wanna go out there, it's a long way away, it costs some gas, costs them. If you fixed it, or if made it better than what it is, they would be highly motivated to participate and try to, it's our biggest challenge. You know, it's bad in that, we got this bullseye, it's good in that, both got a bullseye you can focus on, so it's the positive part of that, not the negative.
Could you,
Keep thinking about that.
could you correct me if I'm wrong? Did you say that 266 parts show up in the training plan? What is
I
it?
believe there's 1,000.
1,000?
1,500, right?
Okay, so 1,000. So, and what is the, so it's 1,000, right?
Yeah, it's between 1,000 and 1,100.
Okay, so what is the fee for the new EIR standalone for up in the,
Around $500,000.
So that's $500.
so
Per
each
parcel.
farm will only contribute $500, right? So if we.
If
go
you got
each-
all 1,000, and that would be if you got every parcel, and some of them
Okay.
aren't going to
Okay,
be involved, some or.
okay, so what if we be creative and make an announcement saying, hey, we don't want you to lose your land. We want you to cultivate, because I heard that they want to work with the county. They just don't know how to go about it. And I think you met with them before they formed this organization, which is up in the Trinity Pine, and they want to work with the county, but they don't know how to go about it. So what we could do, we could just meet. So have them come in and talk and say, hey, we need you to go back to your community and present it to your farmers, collecting all of the names that you want to see this, and we needed 500,000, like $500,000, right? Okay, and then how many farmers willing to be part of it, so you could cultivate 5,000 square feet to get this going. I think this will work if we work with them, because right now, from what I heard, that they really want to work with the county, but they just don't know where to go about, how to present, who to talk to, where to get this, since all of this are coming to, I don't know, rewrite this, ordinance, and then it would be best if we work with them.
Just to be clear, I feel like I want to say this now. It'd be $500 by all those, $500,000 would just be to get an EIR,
Yes,
not
to get the
all
EIS,
the
To get it
things
ordered.
that you need.
exactly, but
Just,
Yeah.
so at least they can get the standalone EIR, and then whoever say, hey, if we have like, for example, we have like 800 farmers out there up in Trinity, because say, I am really wants to pursue this new EIR. 500 or 600 are willing to do that. And then they see the future that they're gonna invest that money into, that will allow them to cultivate 5,000. Then they have the commitment that you have 800, and then they will have to pay for their licensing, to do whatever that they need to get through to CEQA, to get through to the program, to get it for the 5,000 square feet, or whatever that you guys allow to put in the standalone, EIR.
And-
So, real quick, you said they formed a group up there. since
Yes,
that-
I believe it's called Post Mountain, no, Post Mountain Community something, I don't know.
But is it like,
Oh, yeah, Post Mountain Community Association.
all right, is
So-
it like a formal 501c3 type?
They're working on to the 516.
Because that could actually be a process that you could use. Because
Yes,
then you would have a nonprofit to actually petition the county, take in the money as the nonprofit and say, we want to fund an EIR.
And,
Yeah.
and I just want to be clear too, you kind of alluded to this, Dan, but doing the EIR doesn't mean it will come back and say this area can support 800 farms.
No, the EIR might say you guys can only have 400 farms in that area.
whatever,
Yeah,
at least
Or,
something better than
Right,
that.
yeah, right.
yeah, or there's environment, CEQA is
So,
Yeah, but I'm seeing that there is
other
some plans.
things to clarify is that, like, they're making an investment into probably 2 years down the road, if that were to even happen. And then the thing that talking about a standalone EIR for Post Mountain doesn't address is the current license cap. So it's not exactly as simplified as the discussion that we're having right now, brainstorming, you know.
So the whole programmatic EIR would also have to have a cap limit to support. And, yeah, okay. Well, we are clearly,
License cap could go bigger.
Say what?
Years ago.
The total license count could go bigger if we made them all 2,000 square foot.
But the 530 licenses was an arbitrary number that said, we'll do this. This sounds like it'll work. And then if we fill this up, we'll check it out later. And then 7 years down the road, it turned into, this is the steadfast hard number.
That's because Steve won. Steve.
so I just want to say, you know,
Just to verify, so you're saying that all the licenses, 5,300, I'm sorry, I'm thinking too much, I'm pretty tired. The 530 license that was capped, including Trinity Pine.
It doesn't include any particular
Trinity
geographic area
Yeah.
other than the whole county.
Okay. Oh, okay.
But if you incorporate Trinity Pines, you make your own rules.
But then if they have a standalone EIR, would that make
That's
an
way
exception for them too, or no?
I think that question is over all of our heads as
I
far
think
as
that,
CEQA law.
yeah, then we have to get into. Talk to Tom.
well, and I just want to say for the benefit of here, you know, we're clearly off the ordinance right
Yeah.
now and we're visioning, which I think is great. But if you're here for the ordinance and you want to go, please don't feel like you have to stay here. I think we've wrapped up that conversation. And thank you for being here.
Thank you all so much. I'm sorry that I asked you to do a.
Don't call it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.